It's time to discuss one of the main reasons MJ is the GOAT over LeBron and everyone else. We're going to do a side-by-side comparison of the careers of both of these all-time greats. It seems that especially today, we have a lot of young people who are not lucky enough to watch MJ play and might have some bias towards their favorite generational player of LeBron. We've been fortunate to have the chance to see both careers play out live, and I think it's only fair that someone who had that chance to make that comparison. Let's be very clear, it has nothing to do with being a LeBron hater. He's one of the most gifted athletes the world has ever seen and deserves every credit and accolade that goes his way. He's been an incredibly smart businessman. He's been a social activist, most notably in the second half of his career, who's not afraid to speak up for what he believes in. With all of the outside stuff put aside, the only argument we're going to make is when it comes to being the GOAT of basketball. And there can only be one, and that one is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. After a great 3-year career at North Carolina, where most notably MJ went on to hit the game-winning shot of the 1982 National Championship game, Michael Jordan was drafted in 1984 with the 3rd overall pick by the Chicago Bulls. Even before that, we can look back to Michael's high school years, where he was an overachiever. It's notorious that we know that Michael Jordan did not make his high school varsity team as a sophomore and lost out famously to Leroy Smith. This would prove to be one of the biggest catalysts of Michael Jordan's young career that would propel him for years to come. It forced Michael Jordan to work even harder and develop this mentality of being one of the hardest workers possible. He became the leader of the team and eventually became a top recruit at UNC. MJ has gone on to basically wear that chip on his shoulder through the rest of his career and, well, basically the rest of his life. As soon as he got drafted by the Bulls, his one goal was one thing and one thing only: to win. This resiliency for Michael Jordan was on full display because in only his second season, in the 3rd game in, Michael Jordan broke a bone in his foot, and upon coming back was put on a minutes restriction. Despite all of that, Michael still led his team to the playoffs that year, where he scored 63 versus the Boston Celtics. But MJ's mentality from the beginning and always had been winning. So Michael didn't really subscribe to the idea of tanking for those draft picks. He had that killer instinct, that mentality that he would do anything for his team, but more importantly, anything to win. Fast forward to his 5th year, where he finally made some big strides, and with one of those most famous buzzer-beating shots in history, he beat the Cavs and had a chance to go against the mighty Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were known as the bad boys at the time. They were a bigger, tougher team, and they liked to abuse their opponents, and they did just that versus a young MJ, where they physically just beat up the Bulls and easily defeated them. One thing that a lot of people either have forgotten or just didn't get to experience was just how different the rules were, especially the defensive rules during the NBA were at that time. Hand checking was allowed, and defenses were allowed to be a lot tougher and a lot more physical. It wasn't uncommon to have a big bruiser type power forward or center in there, so that if you did come in, you would be punished not just physically, but mentally as well before the next time you would go in. What would be considered a flagrant foul today would probably be just a personal foul back then, and vice versa. You can see just from these clips alone the amount of physical abuse that MJ took during his time. The difference is that Michael knew that he had to be better, he had to be bigger, he had to be stronger. He took that personally, and he knew that if he wanted to be great, that he would need to overcome this team with everything that he had. While the next year they faced off versus the Pistons again, they would ultimately fall one game short, where the Pistons would go on to win their 2nd NBA championship. That summer, Michael, from the day Game 7 ended until Game 1 of the next year, would be in the gym and even hired a new strength and conditioning coach so that he would be more prepared, physically stronger to deal with the abuse that the Pistons and the rest of the league that were giving out during that time. But most notably, that personal connection and that rivalry he had with the Detroit Pistons. Now let's switch over to LeBron's timeline for the sake of comparison. As everyone knows, LeBron was and still will probably always be the most hyped basketball player of all time since his freshman year in high school. He skipped college and went straight to the NBA, where he quickly became a dominant force. Drafted by his hometown Cleveland Cavaliers, he was able to live up to all the hype, winning Rookie of the Year, All-Star, and in just his fourth year, took his team to the NBA Finals, where they would get swept by the San Antonio Spurs. In his sixth year, LeBron ran into Dwight Howard in the Orlando Magic, and although being the favorite to win and having a chance to create one of the most anticipated finals in history by facing Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, LeBron failed to do so and lost to the Magic in 6 games. In his fifth and seventh years, LeBron would run into the mighty Boston Celtics, who at the time had the big three of Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. Now, here's where maybe the main differentiator is between the GOAT and the potential wannabe. The 2009 Eastern Conference Finals might not be spoken enough about, and that gives us a pretty good answer about the real difference between the two players. During game number 5, LeBron James was held to just 3 of 14 shooting. The Celtics went on to clinch the series by holding LeBron to 8 of 21 shooting during game number 6. That Cavaliers' early exit was what led to James's departure for the Miami Heat during the offseason. The Cavaliers owner Dan Gilbert then accused James of quitting on the team during the series and also alleged that he did the same thing during the previous year's conference finals. If you take a look and even rewatch that 2009 series, you can see that a dejected LeBron actually might have quit on his team. Now, the biggest argument to this from all the LeBron fans is that LeBron had, well, no team, and the Celtics had a big three. We'll get back to the Celtics' big three in a moment, but making an excuse for the so-called GOAT diminishes the fact that he simply did not have the will to give it his all against a team he was clearly overmatched against. Going back to our previous example, Michael was clearly overmatched against the Pistons, but he would never quit until he beat them. He made his teammates bitter and made sure they worked out with him that summer so that they could win. What LeBron did after that 2009 series further illustrates that he quit and shows his true character. He ended up forming a new and better, and even more importantly, a never-seen-before super big three team when he took his talents to South Beach to team up with the third best player in the league, Dwayne Wade, and top 10 talent at the time, Chris Bosh. To top things off, they would eventually also add one of the big three stars from the Boston Celtics, none other than Ray Allen. Now, going back to 2009, LeBron fans can't rightfully say he faced a big three when the year after he went on to form his own much better big three super team. This would be comparable to MJ teaming up with the combination of either Larry Bird or Magic Johnson and either Karl Malone or Hakeem Olajuwon back in 1989. This is in fact what LeBron had to do in order to get his first 2 rings. Let's rewind back now to MJ and how in 1991 he was able to beat the bad boy Pistons and finally get over that hump. He then had to go on to face off against the 5-time NBA champion Magic Johnson and the Lakers to finally get his first chip. It was extremely satisfying for MJ to do this from the ground up and build his team just to do that one thing: win. He did this by most notably building up number 5 pick Scottie Pippen, who in his own words said he would not be the player he was unless he had MJ's drive to push him there. The rest of the team were role players who, along with Phil Jackson and the coaching staff, were able to play their role and have their true leader, MJ, get them to where they wanted to be. Flipping back, LeBron had his teammate Dwayne Wade, who had that earlier championship pedigree from his years with the Miami Heat when they won their first championship after their first year losing to a much less talented Dallas Mavericks team. In fact, with all that talent, they were able to win just 2 of 4 championships in LeBron's absolute peak and with the top 1, 3, and 10 talents in the league, plus three-point specialist Ray Allen. Another note to make for that first championship is when it came to crunch time and his team down by 3 with just seconds left, LeBron missed a three-pointer that was luckily rebounded by Chris Bosh, who passed it to Ray Allen to hit that clutch three-pointer to tie the game. Even in 2016, when LeBron had his most impressive championship, beating the then 73-win team of Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors, it was Kyrie Irving and not LeBron who once again hit that big game-winning shot at the end of Game 7. And for his fourth championship, yet again, LeBron teamed up with top 3 talent in the league, big man Anthony Davis. Based on the facts that were stated in this video, I think it is really clear on who the GOAT of basketball really is.